Welcome, everyone, or hopefully welcome back if you've joined us before on our sessions geared and focused solely on higher ed and the pain points and the things that are innovative in higher ed and all of the great things. With me, as always, expert Mike Newcomb. Mike, how's it going today?
Doing wonderful. It's such a great day to be alive in the technology industry, I will tell you.
Yeah, true story. And happy birthday to Mike, of course. His birthday was yesterday, so quick shout out. But let's move on with the business at hand. Today, our topic is tooling and control. Is a really compelling and interesting topic. And here, for me personally, I think of it as almost, in systems theory, you have this this concept of emergence. We see it in nature when birds are flying and seemingly with no communication, they take a sharp right turn altogether. Mike, let's talk about this though from a technology perspective. What does this mean for people when we talk about implementation, when we talk about just daily the running of everything and all of these disparate technologies? Where should we start?
Sure. Yeah, this is going to be a fun topic, Lauren, because a lot of people, when you have a network, they have their way of managing it and using tools to control it, right? And a lot of times things are piecemealed and put together in such a way that it's a patchwork, but it's to solve a problem, which is the customer experience. And that's where Juniper has really changed the game, even since we first started with our routing, of how we try to make things easy and more consumable, so that as a family of things, you can grow and you can easily manage them, right? And so what you'll see in the world, and again, this is something that even I go back to when Juniper was first created. We all know of a certain vendor out there that has a lot of market share, and what they do, for example, is you have to learn a CLI, and again, I grew up in the CLI world originally, and we all know what that's like, right? It's like my command line, and I cling to it, right? Versus what Juniper is, which is we built everything in our architecture around APIs, right? In fact, to simulate a CLI, we actually built the front end on the API to simulate a CLI so that people that love the CLI and cling to it can use it, right? So I guess that's the first thing to think about, is the fact that you've got two ways of looking at life. I have a device, I'm going to work on it, versus something that has an application interface that you can build around, and as it grows, you can make your own dashboard, you can do your own automation the way you want to do it.
Yeah, I love that. The idea, so, we talk about automation, we talk about APIs, and so often people make the mistake of saying, oh, we're going to save you time or blah, 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 right? Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. What's really going to save you a lot of headaches, really horrible headaches, because these things should be fungible. Things should just work. And we've seen those things where literally you just back away slowly, you don't touch anything just because it's Christmas and you don't want to come in and work. So everything's got to stay up. That's so fragile, and we simply just can't keep moving like that, especially as we add more technology to the mix. Well, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Now, I always thought it was a weird thing if you think about it. Again, I'm going back in history, but even today, if you're going to go get a certification from this one vendor that I'm talking about, that's CLI driven, the way that you pass that certification is they'll go into a network, a fairly complex network, and turn on one bit or something and make it not work. So the network is crashed because of something, and your job as the network engineer to get your certification is to go out and try to figure out what's wrong, right? And that doesn't happen overnight, but it's there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things. You touch this, it's going to break that, or whatever, and that's a problem, right? Because that's a mentality of I've got a network that is that fragile. If I was you, I'd be afraid to touch it. I'd be afraid to upgrade it. And most people are afraid. They'll say, it works right now, let's not touch it. So that's a bad way of looking at the world in terms of automation, when things like, I guess the term we use is that machines should be able to configure machines. And so you set things up in such a way where it is easy to diagnose trouble in a network. It's easy from a Wi-Fi perspective, for example, to understand what's going on very quickly. And what you do is you switch to changing your thought process to being one that is about the customer's experience. That how am I feeling as the customer that is a user? If I'm a guy on Wi-Fi and suddenly I don't get access to an application, I'm calling the help desk. What happens when that happens, right, Laura? So I look at those as those two diverging ways of looking at things, and where Juniper has gone has been very much on the tooling side, whether it's the existing network fitting into a competitively held network in many cases. We were built to be open, but to be able to automate all of that.
Yeah, I love that. And there are so many examples. And, oftentimes people start with implementation thinking that that's where automation really shines. But I think it truly is about troubleshooting. It really is about the day two, the ongoing operations. There's a story I remember back when I was working as a partner myself, and I was at a city county building, and I changed the NTP. I upgraded the VMware servers, and the NTP service changed in that new version. And because of that, I left all of the doors locked to them, because the whole system was based on, the NTP service not being incorrect. And literally I couldn't get back in to help. It was a mess, right? But we're talking about these kinds of things, and even more so. I mean, that was 10 years ago. We're talking about these IoT devices that maybe are there for safety and security, or maybe they're doing other things. They're sending warnings, or they're offering some sort of service. There's a million different things that IoT devices could be doing. And to talk about that one little change, that one little switch, the DNS is off, or a radius service is down, right? To be able to go into, Marvis action items and see, oh, wow, Marvis or Mist is actually telling me about, something that they're not even in charge of. I mean, that's amazing. That's true emergence, right?
Yes. Well, so to your point, what I will tell you is that when we're dealing with, like, for example, Wi-Fi, let's talk about that since you brought it up. Since Wi-Fi is normally, in the old days, it was, in the last generation it's a way to get on the internet. And if something breaks, there's a long process for a trouble ticket. Usually the user will raise up his hand saying, I've got a problem. Your Wi-Fi is not working. I'm not getting this. And then again, you may have to go and dispatch somebody, a truck roll, to go find out, is this light on? What's going on? There's like a day's worth of work just to go figure it out, let alone, dragging the poor guy back, say, hey, click here, do it, show me what you got. That's kind of a difficult way of looking at life. And so the thing that I will tell you, in our world, there's actually a couple of things that we do that really make this differentiated, right? There's what we do to manage the Wi-Fi, and then we have what you mentioned, Marvis, which is AI. So they're very correlated, but they serve different needs for diagnostics. For example, because of the fact that everything we do on Mist is 100% it's API driven and in the cloud. So think about that. All the data things are out there in the cloud. You've got access to everything you need at a single point. And then we grind all that information. This is outside of AI. We grind it all down to say, you know what? If I want to just bring up and look at the monitor of my network, I can look at things, the 7 top, I call it the 7 top things that all Wi-Fi networks need to look at. And that's the time to connect, how successful were the connections, what's the coverage, what about people that are roaming, the throughput, capacity, and the AP uptime, right? You grind it all down. That's pretty much what you have to diagnose, right? And so the idea for us is to be able to say, you know what? I can look at this at a tabletop view and say, you know what? I just want to go look. Oh, I can see I've got a problem here. Throughput, for example, might have been a user having throughput issues. You're knowing it before the user knows it. I mean, they may sense it, but they may not have even put a trouble ticket in. But you're able to go in and look at the throughput metrics very quickly. I can look and see, is it a network issue? Some service not working? Is the device itself not capable? What's the coverage and what's the capacity? And capacity, when you talk about throughput, has its own little sub pieces, right? To know that is it non-Wi-Fi interference or is it Wi-Fi interference? Because as we know, co-channel interference can cause network problems, and that's where it sifts through, right? So having said all of this and being able to quickly identify this is it, and even go and look, and this is why I ask anybody that's on this, if you haven't seen it and you haven't had a POC or proof of concept, you need to do it, because seeing is believing on how quickly you can identify trouble here. That when you look at this and you're able to say, oh my gosh, the reason for the problem was this user was on this network and there was excessive client load, right? To be able to click on that user and understand what he's been trying to do over time. I mean, Lauren, the next step here for even this kind of stuff is usually, oh, I've got to go do a trace route. I've got to go sit down and look at my logs and whatever. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to go out there and set it up. Well,
do all the things.
Yeah. And so, but what we do is in the cloud, it's already there. I can see this user. I can see him over time. I can go look at the slices of time and go, oh, look, right here is where he was having his issue, which coincides with an upgrade I did on the DNS server. I mean, it's that simple. And so and this is not even AI doing it. This is just you looking at the way we've architected things through the API and the tools that we have there, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I do want to remind everyone who's watching live, feel free to ask us questions. We're here to answer them. That's the great part about being live. But we'll continue on with our spiel as well if we don't get any questions. Mike, one thing I was thinking about, I know that we have the ability basically to assign different profiles based on geography, right? Based on, I'm in the science building, right, of the higher ed institution. It should get, the access point should get this particular profile, and literally plug it in, it downloads that profile, you're done. And because that's the science building profile. Now let's talk a little bit about things like that are just truly easy, because we do have all of this tooling and control, because we do have all of this built in.
Yeah, so my favorite story about that kind of thing is the fact that because we do zero touch provisioning for when it comes to rolling things out. So we'll call it day zero, basically when you are putting things in. And we had a university that outfitted their dorms. And Lauren, I know I mentioned in a previous training session that it took them 48 hours to do 2,000 access points. They just walked around the campus, unclicked the old ones, put ours in, and it was up and running. So to get 2,000 and less, and the only reason it took 48 hours, by the way, because they did 1,600 on day one. The only reason it took 48 hours was because the student workers wanted more money, to be able to have an extra day of work, right? So it was good. So but they were able to outfit all their dorms in 2 days, and that's incredible. That's all because of the zero touch provisioning. But the other piece that I want to make sure you're aware of is that in this world, not only we're setting up profiles and things like this, but as the network as a whole, from an experience perspective, we actually look at being able to set service levels for all these things that we're talking about. What is acceptable for me from a service perspective, right? Is it 98% connect rate? Is that what you want? So to be able to set all the service levels by the environment, by the building, by the device, by the user, you have all that capability to be able to do those things. And then to be able to have all the background information sitting there waiting for you with our history, being able to look back a day, a week, a month, and be able to look back on what they've done gives you everything you need at a single point. And the proof of all of this, just so you know, we've got like a list, a huge list of users that have touted our benefits, right? So for example, and I think we can use ServiceNow, because ServiceNow is on record on our main website that we've reduced their trouble ticketing by over 97%. That's incredible, right? They went from 100 down to 2, wanting 0, right? We had another university that talked about they reduced their site visits, having to go on site to fix something, by 85%, right? And then the mean time to repair, how long it took for them to fix something. We have one customer that'll validate that they reduced that load of how long it took by 96%, right? And pretty much all their user generated trouble tickets were eliminated. Yeah. So that is the testament of the tooling and control that we do. Just on the Mist side, that's not even, we haven't even talked about what we do with Fabrics, and what we do with Ansible and the automation and the control for things like that. But that, at least on that side, we've got plenty there, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. If we take that small little like micro piece of being able to deploy the APs, that's cool. They did save time. But imagine having to load all of those profiles manually, a person being in charge of, okay, these 40 get science and these 40 get dorm C or whatever. I mean, that's crazy. Then we brought in that too, like you said, the entire portfolio. When we think about site reliability, we have to think about the data center, the campus, any WAN going on, the wireless, of course, everything that folds into a higher ed institution, which is usually all of those things. And to be able to control that using automation, to really understand, okay, what I have to do is I have to start with an understanding of my workflows, an understanding of my application dependency mapping. A lot of these things are really difficult pieces to conquer. So the more easily or the more access, I guess, that we build into our devices, into our solutions, makes it easier for the customer on the operations side. And then, of course, you mentioned all these statistics that actually make it great for the end user, right? The students, the faculty, the staff. I mean, that's really the ultimate purpose, right?
Yes. Well, so I know we talked a lot about
to make people happy.
I know we've talked a little bit about the tooling and the automation pieces of things, right? We haven't talked a whole lot about the AI engine piece, right? The fact that all this information is going up. We have a phenomenal machine learning engine that has been going and going and going for the last couple of years. You're in the same cloud as some of the top of the Fortune 500 are in the cloud with you. All their experiences are being correlated, and we do things that are very unique in terms of being able to provide that. Don't need the user to tell us the trouble ticket, because we're going to tell you before it happens. And so, for example, a simple little thing that talks when we talk about the experience that a user has, and this kind of goes to that your point that you were just making, is that when you talk about something as simple as a missing VLAN, it happens. If you're manually configuring switches, right, you might forget to put a VLAN on a specific switch. Well, again, we talk about that mean time between innocence, for mean time to innocence to saying, hey, it's not the Wi-Fi. Well, this, a missing VLAN is a network issue. It's not a Wi-Fi issue, right? But it's going to propagate, because if the Wi-Fi user is sitting there traveling from building to building to building, and they encounter the building as they're roaming, and they hit this one building, and that switch is no longer there, or the VLAN is not on that switch, you're not going to have a good day. Your service is gone. And so that's the problem with that, right? And so to be able to have an AI engine that says, where we talked about all the time to connect, yes, this missing VLAN will show up on the dashboard, whatever. But to be able to actually go in and ask in a conversational manner to the AI engine, hey, how's my network today? Who are my unhappy users? And these unhappy users will immediately pop up on the screen, and you can see what they are, and you can see the issue immediately. It says, hey, here's this user. Here's the 3 things that they've had issues with. And did you know it's VLAN issues? It's a VLAN on this switch. It could also be, Lauren, just as something as simple. And this is why having an AI engine and to have all this stuff propagate throughout everything we do. I mean, we talk about Wi-Fi, but it's on our wireless or wired equipment, our switches, our security, our wide area networking. It's across our portfolio, so that you're able to go and look at all of that at one time, right? And so that conversational interface is extending for us all across that spectrum of equipment. Right.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so cool. And I always like to give the example of the student walking to their lecture, and they get a notification on their phone, and the phone says, you're 15 minutes early. Here's a coupon to the coffee shop next door, blah, 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 right? And that's a cute little example. But when we think about it, the app is being served out by the data center likely, or cloud data center, whatever. The app works, or the phone works, because you have wireless. You're getting those notifications based on location, because the location services are built in. I mean, it's all of those things coming together, all of those things that you just named from our portfolio coming together to do a simple thing, which is also increasing revenue for your on-campus facilities. So I just think that's a really interesting example.
Yeah, and you mentioned data centers, and that's the key thing that we should talk just a second about, right? When you talk about the data center and how it's architected, whether you're using EVPN, VXLAN, or whatever, you've got a fabric architecture that is out there. And again, some of the tooling that we talk about is how do we simplify all of this, right? How do we simplify the creation of a fabric? I want to do it based on how I want to do it, and I want to be able to say, instead of having to twiddle, I'll call it twiddling bits. You basically tell how you want something to operate, right? From an intent. Here's what I intend to have done. I intend to do this, and so in intent operations, you can go in and it'll configure how you want it to configure, versus you saying I got to remember this switch and I got to do this over there and I got to do that over here. That is a lot of work that has to take place to make it happen. In addition, and that's just things that we do right now. But even since the beginning of our time, because we're API driven, things like Ansible, Juniper has their own Ansible library. So when it comes to true automation, to be able to go in and create what you want in an Ansible format, we support it, we do it. It gives us the ability to really take Ansible, which is basically to automate IT automation. It's an automation engine, but it allows us to do like cloud provisioning or a configuration management, application development, cloud deployment. All these things are something that makes it very easy to use Ansible to do it, or you can use the other things like when we talk about configuration of software in the latest acquisition that we had with Apstra, and we talk about fabric creation and how quickly it can be done. It changes the game with what's there. And again, all the things I'm talking about right now, for us, yes, it's us and Juniper, but all of us, because we've always had to be in that challenger position to a lot of extent, is that it works well inside of an existing network. And so it's not like you got to say, you got to replace this to get that. No, we actually bring a lot of that together.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. I'm being yelled at by our back end peers to end the session. But Mike, as always, a great conversation. I know we could go dive into a ton more, but thank you so much for being here. Any closing words?
No, I really appreciate you, Lauren. I'm looking forward to seeing how your world turns out. I would like to tell anybody that if you want to reach out to me at mnewcomb@juniper.net, if you want to have a further conversation, please make it easy. mnewcomb@juniper.net. I'm happy to have a conversation about any of the things we talked about or in the previous sessions. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and tune in to our next session in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.